Yes, Dean, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm really excited to connect with you and for this conversation.
Yeah, dude, me too. It was funny because when you reached out to me, I did a little due diligence, and I was really excited to get some outreach from a big time American podcaster. And it was interesting because I started watching some old videos of yours, and I remember I thought to myself, that's the dude that mistook Regis Philbin for Archie Manning at the Super Bowl. That I remember that guy. I remember he's a very funny guy, seasoned veteran. Pleasure to be doing this with you, Pete. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Yeah, I gotta bring back some of my greatest hits. You know, there's people that haven't witnessed them.
Well, you can do that now. Like, we live in that world where on-demand content can be seen for the first time by millions of people, right? Where you can reach back into your archives. We do that a little bit here now because we're sitting on, 7 to 10 years of content. But I never bring back the oldies. Like, that's something I just don't do from my days in radio where we would do stunts. I don't know what it is. I don't want to go back to that. Maybe it's the fact that radio's obsolete and there's like slight embarrassment from admitting I was on the radio back in the day. But anything is content these days.
Oh, you live with any kind of embarrassment or shame around that? I feel like it was one of the greatest things in the world to be the host of a live radio program in any era, really. And you had a pretty big show for a pretty long time. Do you look back at it and cringe, or?
No, I look back on it with great pride. Justifying the name of the radio station that I worked at for 15 years, it's not in me, though. I think there's still a little bit of PTSD where you look back and you're like, that was a great time, but I'm still angry about how it ended. So I'm just not going to pay attention to it. Yeah,
for sure. And you've talked in a lot of different places and spaces about how it ended, but the shortest version is you got canceled for something that you said, and you were on the early end of that happening. And I've always had a lot of compassion for people because I did live radio and TV for years and stand up. And I understand what it's like to be in the moment and not think through everything that you're going to say, because if you do, it's going to limit your performance. And we could talk about the art of it all. But I just, I'm lucky I didn't get in trouble with plenty of things that I've said throughout my career. You're unlucky. What you said was not today, seemingly to me, controversial, much less then. But I mean, it must have been brutal, like psychologically, to lose your gig in that way.
Yeah, it was tough. It was tough because it was, what I said that led to the cancellation of our show and the cancellation of my brand was in support of people who were victimized by sexual assault. It was a story about a rapist who basically took an entire weekend, a bunch of drugs, and submitted 4 men in a drug-induced haze to a weekend of sexual assault. And then my producer was a jury foreman on the trial. He came in and talked about it. And several months later, there was an appeal for that trial claiming the jury foreman was homophobic in his assessment of what went on, because I said, it sounds like you sentenced that gentleman to 5 of the greatest years of his life, which, we like to take that tact when someone gets sexually assaulted, men or women, and they go to jail because they deserve it. Right. So, I'm a big fan of street justice. That was the reference. And then, it was about 10, 11 years ago. Yeah, I was like ground zero for cancellation of radio/media guys for cracking jokes about things that certain communities just didn't like anymore. So, but you know what? It sends you on a journey, right, too, Pete? Like you get unlucky like that, or you push the envelope like we did for a long period of time. And I was really fortunate to do a great job and to have the biggest show in the city. I think we had a 40 share in Toronto for something like 10 years, right? Wow. So. Yeah. So I was really fortunate. They were really good to me, and I had a great career. But yeah, things don't end the way you want them to, and you got to kind of dig in and learn about who you are and what's important to you. And that really did encourage me to take a more empathetic approach to some of the comedy that we like to do and some of the content we like to do.
But it hasn't seemed to change your feelings on street justice, you monster. The hell kind of a thing is that to stick to? That's all I want to unpack now.
Huge fan of street justice, where really unfair shit happens to other people. Yeah, it's like watching Mike Tyson. You ever see the video of Mike Tyson where some guy turns around and he's mouthing him off, and then Mike Tyson just pops him in the face? Who's on an airplane?
Oh, I got one. I see what you see. Buzz Aldrin is accused of never walking on the moon by a conspiracy theorist. There's a video of this, and the guy walks up to him and confronts him and says, "You never walked on the moon," and Buzz Aldrin punches him in the face.
Yeah, Listen, if we had more of that, America might not have a MAGA president. Like, honest to God, if we had more street justice.
Well, hold on a second. Don't you think the people who generally side and agree with street justice are probably Trumpers? Like, I don't actually agree with street justice. I can see what you're saying about it, but I mean, I think it's wrong. There should be the rule of law. You should have real justice. You should go to court and have a jury decide on whether or not, not necessarily. What are your thoughts?
I'm a fan of both. I really like the Schadenfreude when someone gets popped and they go to prison for a long period of time for doing something stupid. But your country tried to do that to Trump for the last 4 years and was violently unsuccessful in prosecuting him. So the alternative to me is street justice, sir. Yes.
Yeah. No, I can see a case for it, and I want to talk. That's now all I want to talk about, that moral quandary you led me into. But there is I do think there's a range of empathy for people, and you and I probably differ somewhere on it. Like, I'm ridiculously kind of compassionate and forgiving, I think would be words. I try to understand why terrible people do the things they do. I don't believe in a lot of punitive judgments. I don't think they work. I didn't raise my kids that way, for example. But at the same time, there's plenty of people that think, you know what? You did a bad thing. These should be the consequences, and that's that. And it's I don't want to simplify it, but do you think that we're different that way?
Like you and me, or Canada and America?
Me and you, and then Canada and America. People in general, though, not necessarily me and you. You and I definitely, I'm sure, are. But at the same time, like, if I'm saying I'm more compassionate and empathetic, and maybe you would quibble with the words, then you would describe a different kind of compassion, I guess. I'm not being very articulate. I am very interested in it, how we might differ on it, though.
Yeah, no, I get it. And I think it's nuanced. I don't think it's like a broad brush you can paint with, whether you're a fan of street justice or whether you're a fan of legal justice. And I have a ton of empathy. I'm a huge softie. Like, I'm one of those guys that see something bad happen to someone and I want to stop it immediately. I don't like that. I don't like watching people get hurt, all those things. But I think when you deserve the shit, you deserve the shit. Right. And I think by and large, that it's sort of a Canadian way, real quiet people. Right. Like, but yeah, I tweeted this the other day when the whole tariff war started. Canada has two different vibes, and I'm no different. Hey, bud, and go fuck yourself. Those are the two vibes that we have. And there's a real delineation between the two. So to go from hey, bud, to go fuck yourself, it's about 75% effort, right? We're real good up till 75. And we're forgiving. Like, we're the people who ordered the fish, brought us the beef, and we ate it anyway. That's who we are. Like, but if you bring us the fish, if we order the beef, and then you bring us the fish and you tell us to suck it up or leave, we go right to go fuck yourself, right? So it's just sort of and I don't know if I'm allowed to swear here. Maybe you can bleep this out and make it, okay, good, thank God, because it's going to happen. We're those people, and that's sort of how I am. And I think the general tone of Canadians, like watching what has gone on between Canada and America, and again, being able to discern the difference between your president and his cabal and what they're trying to do to Canada and every other beautiful American that sided with Canada over the last little bit. That's very difficult for a lot of people in this country. I have the ability to kind of understand that. I think a lot of people that have the ability, and it's not hard. You just have to have an IQ over 93 and have the horsepower to be able to kind of discern what the difference is. But there's lots of compassion in this country. We're, like I said, we're very forgiving people. We say please and thank you to Siri, for God's sakes, when we're trying to query something. Like, but if you push us, we've got no problem with street justice and looking the other way.
Well, it's really interesting for a lot of reasons, and I appreciate the nuance and the understanding that all Americans aren't the same. I've always tried to offer that too, even when I was a little boy, and you would hear like countries be demonized, especially I feel like Iran and Russia, Libya. I remember, just watching the news. I would always try to separate the people from the leader or the government and try to understand, more about humanity. And we appreciate that you Canadians would do that for us. Let me try to understand, though, how you are, because we don't really have a lot of thoughts about you. You have a lot of stereotypes and so on, but you have a similar spectrum as we do in politics: the urban rural divide, the liberal conservative, the religious, the not so, the lot of cultural and ethnic diversity, more than America, but still 30 million people across a vast area. And I just at the same time don't think that many of you want to be American. Explain, though, any of those differences within Canada in thinking and ideology, if you want.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Pete, Canada, I believe we ticked up to about 40 million, or we'll cross the 40 million line in
Give me.
2025. Yeah, no worries. It's bigger. I thought it was 35 million up till 2 weeks ago, and someone corrected me. And that number is
have to do with all the Americans.
trying to get into Canada. And to your point, to kind of set the table, give you context about Canada's political and cultural ecosystem. It is America Light, right? Like, we've got a liberal party which acts very much like the Democratic Party. We've got a conservative party that acts very much like a hollowed out, cheap, cheesy dollar store Temu version of the GOP. All of the talking points, all of the cultural identity bullshit, whether it's going after 0.04% of the population with the LGBT community and trans bathrooms and all that bullshit and policies that don't matter. Very similar, very, very similar cultural identity, us versus them. Very similar. And the technocrats in this country and the tech billionaires in this country, like the Shopify guy, Toby Lutke, very good friends with Elon Musk, is propping up the Conservative Party here in Canada. Elon Musk, obviously a big fan of the Conservative Party in Canada. So just to set the table, that is, we have a very similar ecosystem that you have down in the United States, Pete. And it's really because of borderless media over the past 10 years. There are certain provinces in Canada that have really kind of taken a pro-American stance. Yeah.
You kind of garbled that word, and I haven't heard that phrase. Borderless media?
Yeah, borderless media. So I would say 70% of this country now gets their facts from Facebook. Right? It's borderless. Like, we get the same information and we drink through the same fire hose that you do. Mainstream media, legacy media, largely untrusting, untrustable. It is a diminished capacity because no one's reading websites anymore. So yeah, we have the same issue you have there.
How did you guys do? Can you even answer this, or is this an hour-long question? This is a big question. How did you guys do with COVID and trusting government around vaccines and mandates and stuff? I forget.
Yeah, we trusted the government by and large. I believe we had 10 times per capita, 10 times less death than you had in the United States. Interesting stat, 2021, life expectancy in the United States dropped by 2 years. Ours stayed the same. We tried to protect our seniors. The response varied province to province, right? Some provinces had lockdowns, some didn't. Some advocated for vaccines, but largely I believe we got up to 87% vaccination rate and herd immunity within about a year. So that's how we responded.
Oh, wow. That's a great answer. I'm so glad I asked you that you had it. Dean Blundell is a good guest. I like talking to you. So getting back to the kind of the diversity, The other stereotype though I have is that I feel like Canadians, the borderless media has corrupted all of our minds and souls for sure.
Yeah.
But I think that there is a better understanding of civics and a different respect for, feeling around the role of government in your lives in Canada than there is here. I mean, anywhere, people anywhere can criticize and be rightful about their criticisms of government and so on. It's just how pervasive does it get to the point where you want to, let a billionaire go in with the keys and sell it all to the Chinese. I mean, there's a different understanding of civics and there's a different feeling around government is my stereotype I'd like to lay out for you to debunk or explain.
Yeah, no, you're not wrong. I mean, again, I can point to and give you context through the recent tariff cock-up that Donald Trump tried to force into Canada, where we got that 30-day reprieve along with Mexico, just presenting him a 4-month-old plan saying, hey, we'll do this and we'll just put a new cover letter on it. We are already doing what he asked us to do. We don't have a fentanyl issue in this country. We don't have an illegal migration problem that goes into Canada. So we understand facts, right? Canada, by and large, is a far more educated country. And I say this with all due respect, knowing America has brilliant people in it, very, very smart people, great universities, great education, if you can afford it, and if you're a certain type of individual. But Canada pays attention to the little things, right? We pay attention to how our government works. We pay attention to the different aspects of government, the different levels of government, and we pay attention to the rhetoric. But we also are big fans of fact checking. We also, we don't get a bunch of Facebook news up here, right? So because Meta canceled and blocked all news services from Canada coming. So effectively, we have a very different way of going about trying to understand what's going on around us. But we will make that effort a little more, I believe, than the United States will make that effort to understand civics, to understand the levels of government, to understand what's at stake and who the players are, right? Like Canada isn't about party. In the United States, if you're a Democrat or you're a Republican and you see each other on the street, there's a good chance you're throwing hands.
Yeah.
In Canada, we don't do that. In Canada, you can be conservative, you can be liberal, you can be the NDP, you can be Green Party, but generally speaking, we vote for character. And so when we look into the people who are asking us to give them their support to take over our national bank account or provincial bank accounts or to govern us, we will out the character of the individual along with what that means to the party. So generally speaking, we're very different. We look at values and virtues when we vote.
That is something we used to pretend to do. And now it's the biggest question I have for anybody who would support Donald Trump. I always ask, and a lot of people will openly admit, I'm not worried about the character, I'm worried about the policies, and then they'll make the argument. Yeah. But let me just go back to another difference between your country and ours in terms of the government. We have this bicameral system with this racist, stupid old institution called the Electoral College. We also have these gerrymandered districts, which are, literally drawn around where the people that are registered for Republican or Democrat live. In Canada, you have a parliamentary system, and you don't have the type of campaign finance influence either, I don't think. But it seems just, if people don't want to get caught up with the kind of some of the words and descriptions of the systems, your system seems more representative than our system.
It is significantly, but it can be gamed just like every other system, right? And we've seen that massive foreign interference investigation into Canada, where India was outed, Russia was outed, China was outed, is trying to interfere with the electoral process in different ridings. We have MPs and MLAs. You guys have, congressmen and, state people that sit in state Congress. We have very similar things. It's the same, but the parliamentary system lends itself to representation, not unlike the United States does. Which is why we have division in this country. And I'll give you an example. Ontario is the most populous country in the world. That's where I'm talking to you from, Toronto, Ontario. We got about 15.5 million people here. The province of Saskatchewan has 1 million, right? So the massive disparity, massive economic disparity, they get a less representation in parliament than a province like Ontario or Quebec, which are massively populous provinces. So we get it by representation, which continually pisses off the West, right? Where, they're generally almost always voting conservative because it's the Bible Belt of Canada. They never get what they want. So the resentment from the West, which is driving a lot of the division, and that is where you see pro-Trump, pro-MAGA partners like the province of Alberta, the province of Saskatchewan, who are being soundly licked in public right now because they've taken pro-Trump stances and anti-Canadian stances. So it has its benefits and its drawbacks. In the world of resentment, that representation in parliament is driving a ton of division in this country as well.
Well, that's really interesting. But when it comes to what more specifically, what I mean in terms of our lack of representation would be where 80% of Americans all agree on a thing. For example, around gun regulations, like the vast majority of Americans want, say, background checks, the vast majority, but they don't happen because of a congressional makeup, because of the Electoral College, and we can't get things to the House and Senate. In states, they have all kinds of gun regulations in liberal states because those things get passed through. There's more representation. In your country, if there was any issue where 90% of Canadian voters agreed, it would be, that issue would generally be represented through your parliament, through your elections. Is
sure.
Is that right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, absolutely. See, the vast majority, take the gun regulations, for example. The vast majority, owning a gun in Canada is a privilege. It's not a right? And we can revoke that privilege from anybody, any gun owner at any point in time. So we didn't grow up with that idea that it's our Second Amendment right and it's baked in as much as, the freedom and liberty to say whatever you want. It's the same freedom and liberty to have to carry a weapon, right? A handgun, which is really just created to kill. That's the whole purpose behind guns, handguns, AR-15s, all that other stuff. So we've just applied this new gun regulation to Canada, where, if it's an automatic, semi-automatic handgun, we're doing a buyback program now, and we're getting rid of any law that says those guns are allowed to be sold. And that's because of public opinion, to your point. 80% of Canadians see zero reason for anybody to own a handgun. So they float the idea in the public. The public's like, yeah, we agree with that. And then they enact policy and principle. And those policies and principles, you can fight against them all you want, specifically when it comes to handguns, depending on where you're from. The CCFRA, which is the Canadian Firearms Association, is no different than the NRA, but they have no teeth, and they know that this is a country where gun owning is a privilege, but they can do nothing about it. Whereas in the United States, they can't. They can continue to fund, pro NRA, senators, congressmen. They can continue to flood money into that ecosystem. That is not allowed here in Canada. We've got our own financial issues when it comes to funding things that are ridiculous, like third-party agencies, which kind of are the end around they're like your super PACs.
Right.
But we don't have, Canada has triggers and insurances in place where 20% don't get what 80% don't want.
Wow. Well said. Let me go back to another thing you said about like Alberta and Saskatchewan and how what is happening.
We call them Alberta, Bama, and Saskatchewan, Mississippi. Just so
there's the rural thing, so they're more likely white, not as much ethnic diversity. Then there's the oil thing, so that's a huge driver of their economy. And then I guess there's a religion thing. And so I think Americans can understand how that means they're conservative. But I always kind of fall back on, but they don't want our privatized healthcare, do they? Like, they don't want to have to pay. They don't want our gun violence. They don't want to say all kinds of things. They don't want to be American. So what's been the controversy with the reactions of whoever you're talking about in those two provinces through this, all this nonsense we're living through with our fascist president?
Yeah, great question. And glad you called him a fascist president. Thank you very much.
I've been fascist since before anybody knew what Antifa was. My brother's the OG Antifa back in man. I knew he radicalized me years ago. But go ahead. Yeah, we agree.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I love anybody that can rock patchouli in public. I think that's great.
Well, we never went that far. We limited.
You didn't go like deep state patchouli thick.
That was mostly it was marijuana and Chomsky.
Any mushrooms? Did you mix in a little mushrooms?
I never did. I never did, and I still haven't. But I'm angling. I'm ready. I'm 49, and I'm ready to take a trip.
Dude, I'm gonna come down there. We'll go to the moon together. It's the greatest thing you can do for your brain. Anyway, so the mood in Alberta, Saskatchewan, the demographics. Great question. So again, highlighting the disparity. Alberta, Saskatchewan, the Bible Belt of Canada. You have a bunch of OG, white settlers, colonializers, people whose families have been farming those lands for hundreds of years. You have combine that with the oil and gas industry, right? Combine that with the mineral rich province of Alberta, and Alberta has all the rights, financial rights to everything that they get out of the ground there. It doesn't matter what it is, if it's coal, if it's oil, it's an energy rich province. And again, via representation, they just hate anything that comes out of Ottawa. So
they don't want to be told what to do.
No. So it's an easy sell in a media environment where there are no borders, where you're getting this constant fire hose of pro-America, pro-freedom, there are people in Alberta, I would say 10% of that province thinks they've got First and Second Amendment rights. Like they don't know that we've got our own constitution. They think they're governed by, the Declaration of Independence. You remember the convoy? This is just a great example. The convoy in Ottawa.
Yeah, it was impactful up there.
So it was a joke. One of the organizers' husbands, when he was trying to be her surety, they asked him in jail when he was being interviewed by the police and the courts. They're just like, hey, what do you think your wife did anything wrong? Her name was Tamara Leash, and he's like, I think she has the First Amendment right to say whatever she wants. This is in Canada. Like,
oh wow, that's rough.
So these are poorly educated people, highly religious people that live in rural areas that go on feeling, right? And so you combine that with the fire hose of American information, and you literally have, I want to say it's probably 35% of people under the age of 40 in Alberta who believe, because of how much they hate Ottawa, the fact they don't get represented in almost any election, B, the fact that we might hit back with some oil and gas tariffs, and then C, the secular identity of this government not being what they want for their government, which is a Christian identity, a religious identity. It's no different than the evangelical movement propping up MAGA in the United States. and then they see America doing things the way they want things done in Canada. Man, that's an easy sell in Alberta and Saskatchewan.
Yeah, that's tough. But this is my big question.
Yeah.
Does Trump saying we're going to make Canada the 51st state and the trade war that he started, is that unifying those people that are on the far right and those across the country and across the political spectrum against America? I mean, who's booing the national anthem? Are those all kind of more progressive liberal Canadians at like every hockey game that the Star Spangled Banner plays when American teams are there, I guess? I mean, like, is what's happening in Canada in terms of your national reaction? Is there a unified reaction about our president saying, we're going to make you the 51st state? Aren't all those people that even like him putting the brakes on?
Great question. We have been, again, subject to the same division that you see that has been radicalized through the lens of social media for the past 5, 6, 8 years.
I get that. Right? I want to talk about it.
Yeah. I haven't seen a country more divided in my 51, almost 52 years on this planet. I have never been more concerned for the identity of this country than I have over the past, I would say, 5 to 6 years. I've never been more concerned with the way our government is moving towards a fascist, authoritarian, theocratic leaning. I've never been more afraid. In the past week and a half, I have never been more encouraged by what unites Canadians. I have never seen this country, save, when Quebec said they wanted to leave. I've never seen a country get together and ask for the same thing and line up for the same reasons like I did over the past, 7 to 10 days. We need a common enemy, right? It's always us versus them. That is how, you radicalize people. And I watched over the past week, for sure, a country put aside their differences, their ideological, petty differences, and literally line up from coast to coast for our sovereignty. It gives me goosebumps talking about it. Our national security, for our neighbors who we've been fighting with the ones that have the fuck Trudeau flags in they took those flags down. People took bumper stickers off their car. It turned into a Canada strong thing. The whole us versus them.
Yeah. Wow.
Libs versus cons, Trudeau versus this guy, Polyev. Everybody scrapped it. And the other thing that was incredible was how we made politics in this country irrelevant. Donald Trump made hate and division for countrymen in this country, hate and division for conservatives and liberals for a week completely fucking irrelevant. And that was such a welcome break, where if you can look past the psychology of the way your country is moving forward as a Canadian, and you can look at what Donald Trump did for this country, where now the lens is focused, like hyper focused, on diversifying Canadian business interests, on helping Canadians build pipelines, on building oil refineries. And this is like, you've got Indigenous communities who've given the Heisman to building pipelines on their land, going, let's build, with conservatives, with liberals, with Green Party members.
All of that is crazy to hear, but I'm sure there's some smart observation that a scholar has made about how nationalism is very hard to create kind of from within. Mm-hmm. And there's that tribal conflict that so many countries obviously have, but nationalism gets created when there's a threat from outside. And in this case, it's a threat to the sovereignty of your country and directly to your economy. And finally, I would say, I'm guessing, to the products that you make comes with a lot of pride. There's a lot of pride. No matter what you make, steel, lumber, maple syrup, whatever you are making and exporting, oil, those guys, there's a lot of pride around the work they do, building cars. And so it would seem that it becomes very personal when you're talked about that way, and the work and the resources that you actually export and are a huge part of your country's GDP get manipulated and talked to the industries that way. Is that fair?
Yeah, huge. Like, you can hate your neighbor, but you want to stick up for his job, right? You can despise, the political leanings of the guy across the street, but you're going to stick up for his ability to put food on his family's table. Canadians are interesting. I don't know if you have brothers, sisters, you're from a family.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you got brothers, right? You got brothers, and you would fight with your brothers. You'd slap each other around, you'd punch each other out, knock down, drag out fights, familial stuff when you're younger.
Yeah, well, he would beat me. He beat me for years, my older brother, until about 10 years old. I figured out a move, Dean.
Yeah, what was the move? Tell me.
The move is, it was called, he named it. It's called loose chainsaw blade. I think he called it loose chainsaw. And what it is you're just on your back. Once you're on your back, I would start running my feet like I'm jogging in place on my back, and he just kicking him over and over, and he could not get past what he referred to and still refers to as a loose chainsaw. So it all ended there. But
it's like Crazy Fist, but with your legs. That's what you're talking about.
I guess Crazy Fists is the Canadian version of loose saw blade.
I think so. I think it might be.
But you were using this as a metaphor, and I interrupted with what a bit I hope was worth it for folks.
No, it was really nice. It was really nice. So you fight with your brother and your sister. You do loose chainsaw legs or Crazy Fist.
Thank you.
And in the middle of that fight, right, in the middle of loose chainsaw legs, Crazy Fists, someone you don't know inserts himself into your business and starts punching your brother. Well, guess what? All that rage for your brother disappears.
Right.
And you both grab that guy and you start feeding him as many rights as you can till you get tired, and then you switch to the left, and it's over. Because that right you have to fight with yourself, right? That's very different than the right you have for someone to come into your family unit and go, "Hey, I'm gonna whoop that guy's ass for you." You're like, "No, the fuck, you're not. This is my privilege. We get to do this to each other. And by the way, we'll still be friends at the end of it. You're an enemy combatant from the outside who wants my shit. You want to maybe take something out of my brother's pocket." And that's how all of Canada legitimately looked at the last week. It was like, hey, listen, I know that we're angry at each other because you're a Polyev guy or you're a Trudeau guy, but we're Canadians first. And I saw that Canada first aspect come out for the first time in several years. And I'll tell you what, it warmed the hearts of every Canadian who's been so tired of these culture wars.
Well, so where does it end? Because the other thing was that I think was a blink for us here in America, because we're Americans. We just don't care, most of us. B, we have a billionaire with the keys to our Social Security. So we're pretty focused on that and a few other things. But I feel like just because this trade deal was supposedly solved for the day, they're going to revisit it in 30 days when Trump needs to win another news cycle. But I feel like, and what I've heard, and this is the big question, you talked about this last week, like it's going to dissipate. Everything dissipates, right? That feeling that you're describing, aren't you going to be back at each other? And more importantly, for our interests, are you going to forget about us and what we did? Or are you keeping one eye open so that we don't invade and make you the 51st state?
Yeah, we've got actually a knife under our pillow too. So just so you know, we got one eye open.
We're sending Crazy Legs. We got a whole unit of them. I just want you to know they dropped from the sky.
That sucks for us. One eye open. I think this wasn't like a blip on the screen for Canadians. We've seen Trump kind of right. Like we've watched his bullshit for 4 years. Like you were subject to his bullshit for 4 years. Got a 4-year reprieve where Biden fixed the country, handed it back to the same idiot and his losers who are much more hardened. So it's like it's full on, and we're watching 200 executive orders to make your country a worse place. We're watching Elon Musk take over the Treasury, try to fire every single member of the CIA, 5,000 out of 19,000 FBI agents who worked on J6. He set 1,500 hardened criminals free, emptying prisons, which he had a problem if they were migrants, but not the white guys that showed up, white guys and girls who beat a couple of cops up and got shot in Congress.
Tourists.
Yeah, tourists. They're just tourists. Yeah, no, they weren't. They're there for a tour. So, again, we take that information and we start planning. We're a nation of planners. And so the conversations now are, the anti-MAGA, anti-Trump, not anti-America. Canada still loves America. The anti-MAGA, anti-Trump, anti-MAGA American sentiment is good for political business in this country. It's a political strategy now. You're watching politicians resurrect their careers over sticking up for Canada. So we want that narrative to stay in the forefront. Not only is that narrative going to stay in the forefront, so is building for this, building for, Canada's future that doesn't include being super heavily reliable on dealing with the United States of America, specifically over the next 4 years. So you're seeing a whole bunch of people, the political industry, rally around the idea that this 30-day reprieve around tariffs still has nothing to do with what Trump really wants. He wants our natural resources. He wants to annex Canada. He wants to turn Canada into the 51st state. And that 51st state bullshit, Pete, that was magic in a bottle for Canadian politicians. That was lightning in a bottle. It was magic.
How has it played out? Because I think that's probably the most obvious point I didn't even think of is what you're saying. I realize it wasn't a blip for you because politicians are going to keep this. They've got what they need now. And so what are you about to tell me? How has it actually been used and articulated as a cudgel, I guess?
Yeah, it's been incredible. A couple of different contexts I'll give you with the Conservative Party of Canada, who have been screaming about how Canada sucks, Canada's broken, America does things better for literally 2 years, like denigrating this country, the people in it, lying about crime and guns like Trump did, lying about Haitians eating geese, like all the bullshit. Like we've had the same people lying about the same things, denigrating this country, saying it's never been more broken, blah, 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 blah. That narrative has turned around. Now those people are talking about how great Canada is and how we have to stick up for Canada. So they have gone completely to the other end of the pool, and now they're splashing around in Canadian nationalism, where the previous 2 years they were pulling the whole Trump, this country's a disgrace, I hate it here, I'm going to move to Venezuela, and now that conversation's done. Like it's over. And the Conservative Party of Canada is literally underwater in disarray because that was their entire strategy and still is. And we got an election coming this year where Justin Trudeau stepped aside. A gentleman named Mark Carney, who governed the Bank of Canada, the Bank of England, is widely considered to be the front runner to be the next prime minister of this country. Now, the other thing that has done is that has crushed conservative hopes in the polls. They had a 30-point lead, I think, 3 weeks ago. It's down to between polling, it's down to 4 to 10%, right? Like it's cratering support because everybody's lining up behind, the institutions and the people and the character of the individuals who are like, this country has always been beautiful. This country has never been broken. We have an incredible social democracy in this country that sticks up for the marginalized, great social programs, and we're going to start building for the future of Canada. That includes the military, that includes oil refineries, that includes diversifying our partners. There's even conversations for Canada to join the EU. So, everything has changed. Trump,
that would be smart. I think California should join them.
Well, we want California too.
Oh yeah, there's a whole idea of California, Oregon, Washington, right? And they've been around.
California. We wouldn't mind Oregon. And I said this the other day on Twitter. After the impending civil war, we'll just divvy up the border states and both coast states, the blue states, and we'll just build a wall around the middle, and they can have what's left.
I like it. I'm for that. Let's go. I want to get on.
Where are you? What state are you calling me from?
What's that?
What state are you in right now?
Oh, in New York. I live in New York, just north of New York City.
We love New York. We'll take New York.
Yeah, there's a few people I'm going to have to ask you. I'm going to warn you about here, though. A few people, more than a few. That's all really just so fascinating. Everything that you shared today is, I think, really important in it. And it speaks to the way that whatever Trump's interests are, whatever Republicans' interests are vis-a-vis Canada, mainly economic, it's not helping their cause. He's created an enemy that's only going to make getting what he wants and what Republicans want harder and personal. And it's only going to get more likely progressive Canadians elected, I would imagine. I mean, whether or not they win, but certainly it sounds like what you're saying as the pendulum has swung in a shocking way in a very short amount of time as a result of our dumb, stupid, unbelievably shocking everyday president of the United States of America, who's also a felon. And you mentioned character, and I wanted to come back to that.
Please, yeah.
The difference between America and Canada. I think the thing that we struggle with here, Dean, a lot is that our loved ones, our friends, our neighbors could look at this man the first time, much less the second time, and say, yeah, I can support him. I can get behind him because it means something about them. We feel like, how can you not see Didn't character used to matter in our leaders? Doesn't matter not only in the president of the United States, but a governor, a mayor, a principal of a school. Character is everything. The manager of the Denny's character matters to me in terms of how he handles a situation or anything. It's supposed to matter. It always did seemingly matter, and now it doesn't, it seems. And you're saying it's still a thing in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
Well, explain the difference and how you see it. And do you struggle with wondering why that doesn't matter to us? Too many of us?
I struggle with why values and virtues and character don't matter to everybody. You know, I practice a philosophy called Stoicism, and I try to keep it at its roots, right? It's an operating system. It's 2,000, 3,000-year-old philosophy that talks about personal responsibility. And the four main tenets are courage, wisdom, temperance, and justice, right? Those are the values and the virtues and the pillars that I live by. And so Marcus Aurelius, say what you like about him. Gladiator 2 was sucked, by the way. I would encourage everybody not to watch it.
Just watch it. Go ahead, though.
It's not great. Marcus Aurelius had a quote: "The fruit of this life is to be of good character and acts for the greater good," right? To be of good character and acts for the greater good. It's the only way you can trust anybody. And I understand everybody has a different value system and different core beliefs. Those core beliefs and value systems diverge when you include religion and politics. Those two things diverge, right? And then you include human nature, greed, all those things that make someone of bad character who's willing to do something bad to somebody to get something out of it for themselves, right? Lie, cheat, steal, all those things. And I've always been amazed at those people. I've always been amazed at the idea that, you know, anybody could support a thief, serial rapist, serial liar, serial bank robber. I have always been shocked at that. And it's not just because of my value system, but because it's bad. Like it's wrong to put any faith or power in the hands of someone who has the values and the virtues of a serial killer, someone whose character vacillates according to self-interest and need, right? And by and large, we all vote according to self-interest. So when you talk about how you, in the United States, 51 or 52 million people voted for Donald Trump. Maybe the number was higher, 77 million. I can't remember that number.
No, this first time he got, I think 70, it was 70 million and 20, and I don't know how many. Yeah, go ahead.
So wrapped up in that is, you know, self-interest, libertarianism, you know, the religious right, you know,
a lot of fear,
tons of fear. But you also have, you know, and I say this with all due respect to anybody who's voted for Trump or plans on voting for, you know, alt-right conservative interests. You also have the large swath of those people being cognitively delayed, you know. And I've said this before, we had a pandemic, but really the real pandemic is stupidity. Is that if you have a lower IQ, less education, you lack really major abilities to reason and critically think about what's good for the republic, what's good for everybody else. And so you defer that to an authoritarian. You defer your agency and your thought and your ability to be able to make a decision in the best interest of your community, which is where you live. You defer that to somebody else and you remove yourself from that conversation. So I look at it a little bit differently. I see, you know, people that have shitty values and virtues lining up behind Donald Trump, criminals, rapists, thieves, fascist, you know, church groups, like full hypocrisy lining up behind Donald Trump. It's just so they can get what they want. But I believe most of that is driven, and I truly believe that it's the truth here in Canada too when it comes to the Conservative Party. Most of that support is driven by the inability to reason because functionally they don't have the horsepower to do so.
I think I disagree.
Talk to me.
I love that you use horsepower, though, in reference to a certain kind of, you know, intellectual rigor or critical thinking skills or whatever you want to call it. It's a shorthand that I think I may steal.
Go ahead.
Because I think that it's not true, and I think it's important to say why I think it's not true, because there's a lot of people that support Donald Trump who are highly intelligent, educated people. And I think there are a lot of, maybe there's millions of people like you described, and I think a lot of that, some of it's IQ, a lot of it's ignorance, a lot of it's the media that they're fed. But I think that there are so many very educated, smart people, and I think that when we talk about it that way, it discounts how much credit they need to be given for being very intelligent at their business, as an entrepreneur, maybe as a doctor even. I mean, there are a lot of people who are highly intelligent. And I think that you're also describing them when you talk about a certain lack of core values, or certain lack of principles, or lacking, how you describe your identity to stoicism, which I also prescribe a lot to and agree with. But I think that when you talk about them as being lower IQ and not having the horsepower, then you're leaving out millions and millions of Americans who are very traditionally intelligent and formally educated, but they're either brainwashed, or they're super racist and terrified, or very sexist, or very religious, lots of women upholding patriarchy, lots of black folks upholding white supremacy and so on. And I think that we need to account for them. Even those people who went to, what was the study they did on the January 6th insurrectionists, however many of them were, in terms of their income and education, was surprisingly high. And those are the ones that acted and climbed the fucking walls.
Yeah.
So I think we make too big of a deal, and we give a lot of attention to the stark raving, knuckle dragging, drooling idiots who don't know anything about anything. And, street comedians go up to them and have fun giving them a ball of yarn and watch them hang themselves from it. I think that's a lot of them. There's a lot of them.
I do too. I don't disagree with you. And I think that, for the lack of nuance in that conversation, and I think I made reference to it, you have a whole bunch of different groups that have lined up behind MAGA, right? Whether it's the religious right, whether it is, the broligarchy, like the world's richest guys doubled their net worth the day after Donald Trump won.
How about this for a specific measurement, not to interrupt the team, but I had this conversation with my dad, and he was trying to tell me he knows a lot of smart people. My dad is not a Trumper. He hates Donald Trump. But he leans pretty Republican. He has through his life conservative in some of his thinking. He's not religious, and he's anti-religion. He's an interesting, unique, free-thinking guy for an 80-year-old man. But he was saying, he's a friend of his is really smart. He's not stupid. And he supports Trump. How do I explain that? And I said, to split the hair that I'm trying to with you. If the person is smart, then they will admit that Donald Trump didn't win the election. That's my litmus test for them. That's how you know if they're smart. And if they said, yeah, I know he didn't win, and I still supported him, I know he's lying and I still supported him, then their soul is corrupt. They're anti-democratic. They're a fascist. They're whatever. They don't care about the rules, the rule of law, etc. They're not a good person. But that's how I would say, just start with, if they say, if you really honestly think that Donald Trump won the election in 2020, I would agree. You're dumb. You're done. You have no critical thinking, and you're not. And even if you haven't educated, you've just been brainwashed or something. Something's happened. You're broken somehow.
Yeah, dumb, brainwashed, or your ability to earn income or your relevance is tied to denying that Donald Trump won the election. Right?
Those people out. I don't even count them. Yeah, like the people in the administration, the people that go on and live for them. Sure. Sure.
Yeah. And it's funny because there's a statement. So again, going back to Stoic philosophy, Seneca, who's a very famous Roman philosopher, senator, great quote that I stand by. And every time I pump it out on Twitter, everybody goes, "Oh, this is brilliant. Thanks." I'm like, I put it out like 100 times. It shouldn't be any more brilliant than it was the first time, but it is. Religion is regarded by common people as true, by the wise as false, and by rulers as useful, right? Yeah. And MAGA is a religion. It's a cult. It encompasses all three of those things. Common people saying, yeah, this is true. Wise people going, this is bullshit, but you know what? It's in our best interest to line up behind this, and by the rulers as useful. I mean, that's Donald Trump. That's MAGA. That's everybody in his cabinet. That's everybody that has supported him with their public personas, with their businesses, whether it be Bezos, whether it be Musk, whether it be even Bill Gates, who came out. He's like, which I couldn't fucking believe, because Bill Gates is a really smart guy. And he's like, Donald Trump's got some good ideas. And I'm like, Jesus fucking Christ. Are you serious?
Well, all these guys, they all have to, I think there's a pretty easy reason to explain that. Right? I mean, every one of these billionaires has so much of their business tied up with government contracts. And he can turn it on and off. And they all know that Elon Musk has the keys. And so they literally have to keep their business. They're so worried. I mean, no wealthy billionaire has really stood up to him that has any business with the government. It's like Alex Soros' son, and Reid Hoffman, and a couple of other billionaires that are, support Democrats. But the vast majority of them, that have giant entities with contracts with the federal government, they have to. I mean,
Yes.
even the media companies, he's doing this scheme where he's suing them and until they have to settle, and he gets the money, and he's their daddy.
The fear in your country. I got a question for you. I know you've been asking me a ton of questions, Pete, but the fear in your country for people doing content, is that real? Like, do you feel differently about the content that you do today, being so, pro real America, pro democracy?
I don't, because I just don't think I'm big enough. And until they go after the biggest YouTube podcast, non-corporate, I think they're targeting the major legacy media because they have money and they can sue them and they can settle. And so they're not coming for me. So I'm not worried about it. And I'm also, more of a Buddhist than a Stoicist. And I'm doing a pretty good job since the election, surprisingly good, at not worrying, at staying in the moment. I panic every day. Don't get me wrong. Yesterday, I worried about, we're going to lose our insurance maybe. But then I came back to, center and do the work. So I'm not worried. Yeah, I may be naive and I might be missing something, but until I see the big progressive, even, the pod saves guys, there's a few that are independent but very large, the Bulwark, until I see them blinking or ducking or being sued or being pressured, will I even begin to be concerned about me? How's that? Is that a decent? I don't know if that's what you're.
Yeah, it's a very humble answer. You can tell you're Buddhist.
Well,
you have a big podcast, dude. You're you swing above your whatever weight class you think you're in, and that would be my concern. Like, I've been contacted by people in media in California, in Virginia, New York, some people that we've done some co-opted content with, right? Whether it's the guys at the Intellectualist, et cetera, et cetera. And I have actually been asked by people in media in the United States, listen, if things go south here, can I come and stay with you for a couple of weeks? Which is why I'm asking. And by the way, my home is always open to you, Pete. But it seems like it is a very, to your point, seems like it's a very, very different time to be in media, where media is no longer free. And the capture of, all social media, I mean, the oligarchy involved with the Trump administration, the capture of, and the threats towards traditional media has had a chilling effect on any narrative around Donald Trump being remotely genuine, right?
Yeah. No, I think all those are legitimate concerns. I don't know. I think I've been in the fight for a long time locally, had a lot of bad things happen, been through a lot personally. And I think for me personally, I wouldn't suggest this to anybody else, and maybe I could be convinced otherwise by my daughters or something, but like, I'm not like, I would rather die fighting. It seems like a good death. Like, I don't want to go to jail and rot in an El Salvadorian. Apparently that's where we're going to send us. Yeah. But I do like to think that I'm with some of my progressive other guys I know, maybe
no
John
fear of Gitmo. Yeah.
Maybe John Fugelsang's there. Maybe I finally get to hang out with Chris Hayes.
Jim Acosta. Maybe you and Jim Acosta get reacquainted.
I love Jim, but I don't think I think a lot of us, like, I want to fight. I want to fight. It gives me purpose. I wish this wasn't the case. I was really excited about some creative ideas that I was going to go in when Kamala won. I was sure she was going to win, but like, I think I'm uniquely suited for this. I'm afraid. I'm really afraid. I'm not brave. It's not like that. I can't live with myself if I'm not trying to advocate for folks and try to be the change that I want to see. Like, that's my philosophy, I think, and so I mean, if he hadn't ruined it with this virulent racism and anti-Semitism, I would have, kept quoting Braveheart.
You would have kept quoting Braveheart. Is that a common thread? I mean, obviously you run in silos and circles like I do, right? So you've got people you talk to. I've got friends from both sides. I've got friends that are MAGA people. A very good friend of mine is a fairly high profile political guy who's like, I'm leaving Canada for America. Everybody calls him a traitor. I'm like, you're totally a traitor, by the way, but I still like you. I still find you entertaining. Has this changed your friend groups? Has this changed people that you talk to? And is that a common theme? Yeah.
Oh yeah. No, I mean, I can't be friends with people. A lot of my friends were like, in that were kind of more conservative, were also in media. So, I mean, one of my closest friends was Will Cain, who is a Fox News superstar, and kind of ended that friendship during COVID when he was on Fox News questioning vaccines. And I was like, man, I texted him. I was like, I would never ever text you and tell you don't say something. I go, but you're killing people if you do that.
But does he believe it, or is he doing it?
He said he did in the text. He's just asking questions, kind of thing. So that's just one example of it. But certainly, you've got your family members, you've got people. But I think most people really struggle. What the hardest thing is people who have a lot of folks at their office, at their job, that they know are basically fascists. They know are Trumpers. They know are MAGA, and especially for people who are people of color, because you can see them because you have eyes. Now anybody is being considered woman. Now a woman is being looked at her job. Was she DEI hire? Much less a black woman. And so there is real palpable fear in the workplace, in public, at a school board meeting, which is where I've had my most brutal fights and scars left. So it's real. Yeah. Neighbors are at each other. Facebook is the place to fight. It's bad. People are mostly good, and community is everything. And so I think, through all of the adversity and the trouble, people are finding community, and I'm always an optimist, and I try to be positive. So this has been really hard for us, but do
you expect any? I can't imagine it. I mean, I wrote something yesterday, a tweet saying, "Hey, you got to be able to separate MAGA Americans from Americans." Like there was a hockey game the other day in San Jose. Sharks. I can't remember who they were playing. A Canadian team. Canadian anthem was being sung. As you know, we've been booing the American anthem, not booing America, booing America's president for the tariffs and the shit about Canada being a 51st state.
Well done. I'm with them. I'm going with you. Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of you are, and I appreciate that. And I saw that. That was.
I mean, it's just a terrible song.
Yeah. I don't think anthem should be played at any event, but that's just me.
Agreed. Yeah.
But I watched the San Jose fans cheer loudly the American anthem yesterday, and the takeaway from that I had was like, man, those are real Americans. Those are the Americans that, the silent majority, vast majority of America that's largely chilled to the point where they're like, we can't say anything, but we'll show our displeasure in these little ways for what's going on in America. Being able to separate MAGA Americans from Americans, that should be one of our biggest senses of pride in this country, because we love America. We love what America stood for, what it stands for. We don't love America's president and the people that he's using to steal from you, to hurt you, make you sicker, and turn your country into an authoritarian shithole. However, we recognize the struggle that you're going through to that point. So we have enormous amounts of empathy. Like we really do. But I guess the question I would ask, just after giving you that context, is that you've got 4 years of this. Do you think the Democratic Party is going to push back? Do you think there's going to be a movement? I'm starting to see a bunch of protests, pro-immigration protests pop up. Cops get pushed back in lines. Do you think that there is going to be some sort of reckoning, like some sort of progressive, decent, humanistic reckoning for the Trump administration over the next 4 years? Or is it just grin and bear it?
No, I think there's going to be a massive reckoning. Yeah, I think you're seeing it. People are getting organized, and there's millions of Americans that think the way that I think, that we'd rather fight, or die trying, throw as much sand in the gears as you can, fight it out. It gives people a lot of purpose, and I think a lot of people are just desperate too. People are terrified for a lot of really good reasons in this country, and obviously those who have been historically marginalized first, and so there's going to be real divisive problems. There's going to be violence. There's going to be a lot of economic issues, I think, for people. It's going to create real fear, and out of desperation comes, as you know, some pretty bad things too often, and often also unity. And I think you're seeing it now. I don't like to really predict these things, because I also believe in this kind of uncertainty that life is. And we sit here and we sometimes pontificate about what might happen, but it's not far without the realm that, Trump's almost 80. He could die. Any number of things could happen that just changed the game. And we've seen so many of those things happen, like Biden dropping out. No one really expected that. And so I feel like we get those instances. No one thought COVID was going to happen. Without COVID, he would have gotten reelected likely. So I lean on the only thing we know is what we don't know.
That's a very, for a lot of people that don't like uncertainty, that is an uncommon theme. I wish more people would share it. Yeah.
Uncertainty is the worst thing for anything, on anything.
But it's only we're guaranteed. That's the thing that a lot of people they get upset, they get concerned. It's like, I don't know what's going to happen in the next 4 years. So much change. I hate change. Change is like life's greatest guarantee, that and death, right?
Right.
You know that.
But exactly. But you want to control as much as you can, and those who want control more than anybody and who have it are, the leaders of industry. And so when certain companies and industries don't know what the price of the parts for their car are going to be, or where they're going to get them, or what the laws are going to be around what car they have to sell, all those things create uncertainty, and they don't like it. They lobby for certainty in markets so they know what to make and what people are going to want to buy. And I do also think that that matters. And he backed off these tariffs when markets started cratering. I mean, I don't know if that's why, but it certainly didn't help his dumb stunt.
No, it didn't. But he also backed off because, you had people like Grassley and other, people like the Rand family say, hey, we need to not do this as a tax on the people. And there's some stats not a lot of people know, which never get repeated when anything like this happens. 1% of the fentanyl that comes into the United States comes from Canada. We get about 180,000 kilograms of drugs coming into Canada from the United States every year.
How much of that goes through your home alone, Dean?
Just 2,000 to 3,000 kilos. That's it. But I hustle it out pretty fast so no one can catch me. No. Thank you very much. 30,000 illegal guns come into Canada. 70% of the guns used in violent crimes and homicides in Canada come from the United States. So let's just put that there. Illegal immigrants, probably around 100,000 come into Canada from the United States. Last year, 18,000 from Canada into the U.S. So U.S. into Canada, about 100K, 18K from Canada. No one's trying to break into your country, is my point. And the misrepresentation of that, and that being turned into, hey, we need to annex Canada because of this deadly, poisonous fentanyl fire hose that's coming in. It's all bullshit. So then they pivot to something else, right? Where he's like, we like their natural resources. It's going to be a lot of fun up there. Hey, you guys want to pay less taxes? It's going to be a lot of fun up there. The Wayne Gretzky should be the governor of Canada. Like it's the craziness and the misrepresentation of those lies as it pertained to any kind of narrative around Canada, not existing anymore as its own country, instead being assumed into the United States of Canada, was all predicated on a lie. And how do we get out of those tariffs? This is a great story. This just proves your president's a fucking moron. And the people around him are stupid. He said he wanted a border plan for a non-existent border issue. So what we did was repackaged last year's border plan that protected Canada from the influx of drugs and illegal immigrants coming from the United States into Canada. And we put an American first cover letter on it, handed it to him the other day on a phone call with Trudeau. And he's like, okay, yeah, I'm good. No tariffs for 30 days. Mexico did the exact same thing. 10,000 National Guards. I think 8,500 were already on the border. They sent another 1,500 today just to relieve the quota. Like, literally none of what Trump or MAGA has tried to accomplish by saying they want Canada to be the 51st state. And I believe they're going to invade Mexico. I'm of the firm belief that that's happening with troops amassing on the border, a la Little Green Men in Crimea. But you're the whole idea behind the reasons to annex Canada or any border security not only was a joke, but the response and the solution was 6 months old and something we've been doing already. And again, we just put a new thumbnail together saying this is Trump's plan. It wasn't. Right. It was Trudeau's plan from half a year ago. So,
yeah, it's remarkable how that played in America. I mean,
I'd love to know the difference. Like, is everybody screaming about how Trump took down Canada? Is that what he said?
We all said, those of us who paid close attention to the negotiation and did a little bit of work looking up the kind of statistics about trade, some of the things that you mentioned, we believe the narrative that you just told, which is that they just appeased him with something they already had and gave up nothing and got everything, and that he got rolled. So there's a lot of Americans that are saying and interpreting that he got rolled. But then there are the MAGA people who buy whatever he says, and their narrative that comes through their right-wing news channels and Facebook friends is that he's a genius. And then he got them to put 10,000 people on the border and did more in 1 week to save America than Democrats did in 4 years.
Yeah, not only is that stupid, let me give you some more stats. 90% of the potash you use for fertilizer in the American agriculture industry, 90% of it comes from Canada. Comes from a little province called Saskatchewan. 90%.
Well, you know what? I don't fucking use potash, so I don't give a shit because I don't even know what it is. Also, so I'm not sure why you're even.
It's piles of minerals that are used to fertilize.
What do I need that for?
You don't, because you don't have a little garden in the backyard, Pete.
I do have a little garden. That's why I'm reacting to that. But I mean, I guess the example is
me. You need us. You need our potash.
If you like food.
Yeah.
Then that's a good thing for us to have. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's like critical. Your crops would die in a year, right? So your country would starve. And then let's talk about oil and gas or energy. The state of Maine, several border states, up to 80% of homes are powered by energy that comes out of Canada, right? So let's shut that off for a second. That's a major cataclysmic disaster in February. And then let's talk oil and gas. 80% of your natural gas comes from us. 60% of your oil comes from us. 60% of the oil that you use in your cars comes from Canada. So we're sitting here going, okay, let's add 25% on the oil and gas. Let's restrict oil and gas. And Trump knew that. Everybody in his country knew that. And that was the escalating aspect of Canada's trade response, which is like, we're going to hit everything with 25%, and then we're going to do some other shit. And that other shit was, we're going to sanction the shit out of your country. We're going to prevent you from getting the things that you need. And they knew that. Trump didn't just blink. Trump didn't just buy a year-old package that we put together for us to protect us as his own package. Trump threw up all over himself, as did the United States of America's MAGA interests, where they're like, don't do it. You had Cassidy and Tom Tillis and, all the senators like Grassley going, please, Trump, don't do this. You have no idea how bad this is going to be. Right. And he played chicken and lost. Like, he vomited on himself. It was like watching an exploding ketchup at a dinner. He was just, and then the fucking crazy part was how hard we all laughed when he's like, job done, Canada caved. I'm like, you got to be kidding me.
The meme I saw that was most popular that I shared too is a picture of Trudeau talking to the Mexican president. What's her name? Sheinbaum,
yeah.
And Trudeau is saying in the comic book bubble, so I offered him what we've already been doing, and he dropped the terrorists. And then it's the picture of her saying, and her bubble is, OMG, same.
That's exactly, dude. And I put this out the other day because I tweeted that. I'm like, it's funny because it's true. Like, that's exactly what happened. And nobody understands how important Canada is to America. Nobody, and the other narrative that went around was, yeah, your military's our military. Without us, yeah, you'd be dead. And I'm like, no one's ever tried to invade Canada, bro. Like, nobody. We've never had any use for your military ever once. You can shoot the hell out of a spy balloon, but we don't really need you for anything else.
I mean, I have you've helped us understand the value of Canada in this conversation. I have a million more questions. So let's make another appointment, Dean, because I've absolutely loved this. And you're just so good at talking about these things and obviously deeply thoughtful about it all. So I really appreciate you joining us and I look forward to having you back. You'll have to come to one of our hangouts too.
Dude, love to invite you on my show as well, Pete. Anytime you've got time, We'd love to have you, get your perspective from America, what went on to Canada, what's going on in your country, and what you're doing to fight back. I mean, we're rooting for America. We're not rooting for Trump. Everybody, the book's out on him. We're rooting for real America right now.
Happy to come on and talk to you about what we're doing to fight back, because I feel like that's the most important thing to make sure everybody knows around the world, that there are a lot of people who I'm standing on their shoulders every day who are doing as much as we can. A lot of us realize we are the ones we've been waiting for, and we weren't planning for it, but this is the case. We understand history, we understand what happened in this country, and now it's our turn to do something. And, many of us are choosing to do everything that we can. So I'll be talking about that. I'd love to talk about that with you, and really appreciate if you could do me a favor and just say thanks to Carlo on the air right now, because without Carlo, I wouldn't have known your work and had this great opportunity to talk to you.
Carlo, I have no idea who you are, but if he's your Ontario friend and he likes me, I like Carlo. Thank you, Carlo, for hooking Pete and I up. I really like Pete. I got a fascination with bald American podcasters now. Let's go.
Well, I got 1,000 more for you then. Thanks, Dean.
Thanks, buddy.
And got it, man. It's fucking fascinating.
Was it okay?